everyone, welcome to Potluck Food Talks. Today we're going to, what are we going to talk about today?
What are we going to talk about today? Fuck ups in the kitchen, just like we fucked up the intro for the episode.
Fuck up situations. Mainly situations that apparently don't have a solution, that you're in the middle of the kitchen, and you get to see that a lot. Yeah. Chefs coming up with this crazy way of solving problems or just freestyling a solution that just out of pressure. So remember this restaurant where we used to work, the one that we have mentioned so many times at the line?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was outside checking my phone, and a technician came to repair the vacuum packing machine. And he was like, okay, everybody listen, nobody should touch the machine in the next half an hour. And I didn't listen. So I went straight to the machine and I used it and I broke it, And chef was like, he needed to pack his fish for service to sous vide cook it during service. And he went completely mad and crazy, like, I don't care how you do it. You repair that machine and you vacuum pack the fucking fish and blah, blah, blah. So I went back to the machine and I tried to figure out what was going on. So I checked, and the frame, there was this rubber that makes the vacuum work, and it had like a little piece missing. And I was like, okay, this just needs something to fill that gap, So I went to the storage room, checked like for different whatever I could use, and I found some marzipan, and I just stick it in there, and like in 5 minutes the thing was repaired. But I remember this were like these situations of extreme pressure where you need to just like solve the impossible,
Yeah, you just do it. Yeah, like one example of that sort of thing is like, I remember working for the chef who, when he got angry during service, he would do things to stitch you up, right? So he would like turn off your ovens, or he would like switch your fires around or your pots around.
That's a classic. A classic from a old school bully chef.
It's great, yeah. And he did this one thing that I know that he learned from his mentor, because he told me about it himself. And one day I was working the associate, the fish and meat section and sauces, and he took my, he was having a rant at me. He was like, what the fuck are you doing? Get your shit together. And then he took my jus. All right. For people who don't know, jus is a concentrated meat sauce, like a demi-glace. It takes a really, really long time to make, really long infusion and reduction of broth of brown stock. And he just dumps it into the sink. And then when we continue service, and he keeps calling out orders for dishes that contain jus. So I'm sort of thinking like, well, what the fuck am I supposed to do now? And I know perfectly well that when he asks me, so for example, for a meat dish, and I don't give him the sauce to the plate, he's not going to be like, okay, we're not going to put sauce on because I threw it away. He's going to give me shit because I don't have sauce, even though he threw it away. Right?
Yeah, of course. That's how it works. Of course.
So like, what did I do? Like I straight away, we had these like big hot plates. I put like 4 different pans down on it, and I just went into the back and got some like brown stock, and I just let the pans get ripping hot, and I poured the stock from one pan, which obviously made like a big sort of like straight reduction, and then it boils down. You pour it into the next hot pan, into the next hot pan, into the next hot pan, and then you repeat it until you, in a very short time, have something sort of resembling a sauce. And I was like a little bit proud of myself in that moment, but at the same time, it's like really frustrating, because essentially what you make is nowhere near as good as a sauce that you cook properly.
Yeah.
Making a sauce, you put so much care and attention into it. You skim it, you make sure it's the right temperature, you reduce it down, you all the stuff inside it is roasted really carefully. But yeah, it's this kind of example where you just do what you have to survive, really.
I have 2 more stories in mind, and these 2 were like the 2 most difficult things I ever had to solve in the shortest period. One was like, I was in this small restaurant, and like an embassy hired us to do a catering. And they wanted to have these empanadas, like this, how would you describe an empanada? Like a Galician empanada. It's like a dough pocket. Like a savory pastry.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just for this event, we had to buy some trays. So I went to a Turkish market near the restaurant and found this like cheap aluminum trays I could use perfectly for this. So I do my dough, my stew, everything. I prepare all the empanadas and I start to bake them. And it was like a short deadline. I had to deliver them in 1 hour, and there was not a lot of maneuver frame or maneuver space to do anything. So I have everything ready and okay, let's bake them. I tried to put them in the oven, and the oven wouldn't close. This was like a real small restaurant. So these were like similar to house ovens with, like the ones that you have under the stove. It didn't close because the shape of the tray was not compatible. So this thing was too big, and it just needed like, not much, like 1 more centimeter to close, but it wouldn't close. So it's impossible to bake something like that. Like it just won't work. And also I just had like 1 hour time. And this thing was losing temperature, like I had to solve this situation like right now. So like every time I've been like in this kind of cases, it feels like a survival instinct, like I start just looking around to see whatever I see first and how can I use it. And I'm also like super ultra focused, and there's a rush of adrenaline in the whole situation. And in this context, I was like looking around, and then I see the rests of the dough that was on the table. And have you seen these medieval recipes where you have a pot and you sear it with dough on the borders? That's the image that came to my mind, and it was like, of course, I can sear the frame of the, of the whole oven with dough. And I did, and the whole thing, it became like a bread, like a crust, around the whole door of the oven. It was beautiful. Yeah, and it was like if nothing happened, like everything was delivered on time. Nobody noticed anything.
There you go. Yeah, it worked. Like, I love that, and it's like this feeling that you describe where you just jump into survival mode, I think that's like a really unique skill that chefs have. That not like that many other professions have, this instant problem solving. And it's like, because you have the pressure. You have the time pressure. You don't have like, oh, something doesn't work. Okay, blah, I'm going to. No, it's like, I need to get these in right now. And like, I think that's really cool.
Yeah, that's a key attitude that I would say from which I distinguish an experienced chef from a rookie. Like someone who would come and say like, yeah, I couldn't solve it, like just tell them we can't do anything.
Yeah.
I think like most of the times there is for sure something you can do.
Absolutely.
But, you want us to tell another one, or should I tell the most difficult one I ever had?
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Man, this was crazy. And this was really like okay, what the fuck can I do here? Like, they hired me as a private chef, and this was like a rafting expedition in the Amazonas. And these were like super high profile guests from like a Middle Eastern country, monarchy, They were traveling like these 2 princesses with their bodyguard, their rafting instructor, their private guide. And then there was this whole entourage where I was the private chef. So they told me like, yeah, whenever we're going to arrive to a village, and there you can buy local ingredients and stuff. And then there is like a 2-hour ride by car to the place where the rafting starts. And then we can. And I remember I was still in the city before traveling like to the rainforest. And I was thinking about this like, yeah, sure, you can buy things in that village. And I was like, no, man, I'm not risking it. I'm buying everything in the city. I'm just going to be super safe, because the thing is, we had no refrigeration. So you put everything like in a cooler with big blocks of ice, and that will refrigerate the stuff for the 3 or 4 days that you're traveling, right? So they told me, yeah, also when you arrive to this village, you can buy like a big cube of ice, like, like a kitchen size cube of ice. And I was like, okay, perfect. Well, that didn't happen. We arrived to the village. First thing I see is like a cow's head with flies flying around and all of this, like crappy, bad quality, whatever, like vegetables or stuff. Like nothing glamorous, nothing romantic about it. And I was like, okay, good. At least I bought everything I needed, but I don't have any ice. I mean, there wasn't even gasoline in this village because it was smuggled. Because it was like it's a basic ingredient for cocaine production. So It was illegal to have gasoline. Imagine that. So we arrived to this place where the thing would start, like the trip. It would be like a 4 or 5 days trip. And I'm waiting until because they would come after me. And when I arrived, there were like 20 people, like building like this, whatever stuff, like a grill and a place just to spend one night there, but it was like this high profile trip. So I'm waiting for the ice and the guides, they arrive and I ask them, okay, well, where's the ice? And he opens this cooler with just like a pool of water and 3 pieces of ice swimming in it.
Amazing.
And I look at him like, dude, and he was like, what? And he was like, what should we do? And I was like, cancel the trip. We're going to run out of food, like on the 3rd day for sure. Like there's not enough food like for the 4 days without refrigeration it's very risky. So that was like that survival mode you were saying, like the only thing you're thinking about is how to solve this. I was like just thinking until I remember this was not something like that took like 5 minutes. This was something like I realized the next morning when I woke up, I was like, of course, if we get living birds, we don't need to refrigerate them. I asked someone. So I asked someone, hey, there are some farmers there. There was like a house with a farmer and he was like raising chickens and ducks. And I was like, buy every bird he has, pay them whatever they ask for and we bring them alive. They will survive 3 days for sure before we kill them and we cook them, Like, and they brought us like the birds inside like a bag. Like, oh, here are the birds.
That's fucking crazy.
Yeah, man. And so it was just before sailing, you just on the raft. It was like a raft trip. And it was like, okay, perfect. Now we have food for the next few days. Then a few days later, I also asked the guides to fish stuff for me. It was like a super crazy trip. Also, since I'm already telling this story, man, I had never killed an animal before. Mm. And it was like a super messy experience. I remember once reading, I think it was Magnus Nilsson. He had this story that he would teach his chefs how to kill a bird and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, I thought like as a chef who eat birds and animals, I think it's important to go through that experience at least once and understand what you're doing and that these things they don't grow in the fridge, And this was also like a super mess. There was this guy, like the one who told me how to do it. He was like, yeah, you take like the whole thing, like legs and wings, everything like in one bunch. So you have like the whole 2 legs and 2 wings in your fist, so to say. And you need to grab them really hard. And then with a knife, you would cut the throat off. And this thing would start bleeding and moving. And you should hold it, while it's moving and your hand is shaking and going crazy like for 1 minute. It takes that long, And he did it first, and then I was next. And when I did it, I did like the common beginner's mistake, like the wings got liberated. So and they started like moving their wings like crazy and splattering blood all over the place. It was super traumatic, man.
Fuck.
And I remember also. I remember also, like, okay, you never do that with a bird, but this was a situation. We need to take the feathers out and to cook it right away, and it was so strange to have like a kitchen and a chicken breast warm because it was still warm,
Of course, yeah.
You usually associate this kind of thing like with cold ingredients, and yeah, there are more stories from that trip, but I guess that's enough for this episode.
Man, that sounds absolutely crazy. What an experience, huh? That's like, that sounds like a trip where you have to solve like intense problems just the whole way through,
All the time. Yeah. I remember then when I got back to the city, they asked me, like the place I was working, like, yeah, and should we make a business out of this? Like, should we, like, once in a while send like a chef de party to take care of this kind of things? And I was like, man, it was like one of the things where I was most challenged in my career, like problem solving wise, like you said, like man, you're in the jungle, you have super high profile clients, and you need to solve stuff 3 meals a day,
Sounds like you found a solution, like in the last moment.
Yeah, those two were really epic. What about your Mayo story? And was it like in a Japanese restaurant you were working in?
Oh yeah. I mean, that was less problem solving. That was more like a showcase of like the sort of no questions asked mindset that you develop. I was in a Japanese restaurant in London, and I had just come from a very high profile Michelin star restaurant in Spain that's like very well known for unusual techniques and like creative approaches. And it was a big jump because the restaurant in London, it was like much more casual. Right. And so like the chefs were also much more casual. They're great chefs, really, really good. But they like the vibe was very different. And I remember we had a really busy day, and one of the chefs came to me and he was sort of like, hey, we still need to make some mayonnaise for service. And I was like, and he was like, can you take care of it? At that point, I was like a chef de party, and I was like, yeah, like I was super busy, but I was like, okay, come on, like I'll take care of it. And he was like, all right, I'll give you a recipe. And he gave me this recipe for this Japanese style mayo. And I was like, okay, I started getting everything together. And so this guy comes to me and he's sort of like, oh, but by the way, the head chef, he wants us to do the mayonnaise with chopsticks because he says he likes the texture better. And I didn't even question it. I just said to myself, all I was thinking is sort of like, well, it is what it is, And so I took these chopsticks, like I clamped them between like my fingers, took them in like a sturdy grip and just started beating the shit out of the egg, because just like back. And I was like, I didn't have a lot of time, it was like right before service. So I started emulsifying the oil into this egg, like holding the bowl like on an angle with like a towel, and just sort of like clamping these chopsticks in my hand and beating. And I'm like halfway done when I look over and I see like the chefs like looking at me, just kind of like half like eyes open, half laughing. And I realized it was like a prank, that they were sort of like, but the funny thing was about the situation is that it was a prank because it's pretty impossible to do a mayonnaise with chopsticks, But I didn't question it, and I was just like, man, just fucking get on with it, Like just get it done, just make it happen. And I did, They were actually very like, even though it was a friendly jest, but in the end they were actually very impressed that I managed to pull it off, You
remind me of another story that also involves whisking, but in this case was whipped cream. So there is this guy, like super enthusiastic, and he needed to whisk some cream for a dessert. This typical strawberries and cream dessert. And he started like, like making a real mess, like with the bowl and the whisk and plaka, and splattering it all around with cream. And the chef says that, like, it was a sous chef, like, hey, what are you doing? Dude, like, do that in the sink. And what he means is go with the whole thing, like the bowl and the whisk in the sink and do it there. So when it splashes, it will be, in a controlled environment. And at that moment, the guy was talking to me directly. And as he's talking, we start to listen. The thing that he was doing, like, plaka, 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 now was like, plaka, plaka, plaka. So, and the sound, we just recognized that he had poured the whole cream on the sink and was, like making this big square whisking technique, man. I remember laughing like for hours, man. It was so fucking funny.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. That's so hilarious. I can just see it. I can hear the sound also, like in my imagination.
Plaka, plaka, plaka.
Yeah, that's really funny.
That's it for this week's episode of Potluck Food Talks. If you like what we're doing, make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. You can also find us on Instagram and TikTok as Potluck Food Talks. The show airs every Monday.